Hello and welcome to the Kongversation. I'm Chad McCanna.
I'm Hyle Russell.
And we're about to regale you with opinions on Donkey Kong 64.
Gather around, children, and we'll tell you a tale. And then we'll tell it to you again. And then we'll tell it to you again. But we can't
tell you the full story because we haven't found the tag barrel to tell you the purple-colored part of the story.
Right. Well, first we have to unlock the purple-colored part of the story.
Right.
Then we've got to get to a tag barrel in each chapter of the story.
Sure.
But
and there are also parts of the story that are covered by these mountains of dirt, and we need to not only unlock the purple part of the story, but we need to visit this part of the Kongversation landscape to make sure that we have a move that will allow us to unlock the parts of our Donkey Kong 64 opinions that are under that mound.
Now I know what you're thinking. Well, this sounds a little convoluted. And yes, while that looks like that's the case on the surface, you have to realize that if you want an 80-hour story, this is the way you're going to get it. I mean...
And who wouldn't want an 80-hour story? You would have to be crazy.
Or Peter Jackson.
Yeah.
So anyway, Donkey Kong 64, by the way, if you haven't beaten Donkey Kong 64, spoilers ahead.
Spoilers for the last 16 years of your life.
Oh my God. 15 and a half. Let's not age us up.
All right, fair enough. As of recording, I am 1 month away from turning 30, so I am all for the rounding down when it comes to ages.
You know what's really frightening? You're now older than Donkey Kong was in the original Donkey Kong Country.
And I'm sure that Donkey Kong's age was the forefront of everybody's minds.
I wagered he was about 25.
Okay, so I've been older than him for 5 years.
But this is the first time you thought about it.
Oh my God, you're right. Okay, so last week we touched on a lot of the larger kind of meta elements of Donkey Kong 64. This week we're really going to drill into the the different modes that are exposed via the menus and then the worlds themselves.
Yeah, we're really going to drill in. We're going to frack the hell out of Donkey Kong 64.
That's right. So if you are sensitive to earthquakes, do not listen to this show and do not live in Dallas, Texas.
Right, yes. Actually, the whole middle America, basically, at this point, is no man's land thanks to fracking.
Yeah. Jesus Christ. Can you believe that? Okay, all right, never mind. Let's not get into for fuck's sake.
Yeah, we have a lot of fans who are in the oil industry.
Oil industry, right.
So
I know the Koch brothers are big Kongversation listeners.
Well, you know what? They just love Tiny Kong, and who can blame them?
Yeah.
She loves counting money. They love counting money.
Mm-hmm. She shrinks her morals to suit her mood.
Right. So anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, where do you want to begin? Because a game this hefty, it's like, how do you even start? I feel like Michelangelo. I feel like Michelangelo looking at the marble he used to sculpt, the statue of David. It's like, how do I even begin this?
Well, what I like is that in our planning document, the first bullet that you wrote was a brief discussion on the dynamic lighting used in the game.
Yes.
So I guess we could talk about the lighting. While that might not be the most logical place to start, it is certainly a place.
Well, I think it's a good place to start, and not just because I wrote that in the notes.
The dynamic lighting.
Well, last week we talked a little bit about how Donkey Kong 64 was a bit more cartoonish than its SNES and Game Boy counterparts.
Well, yeah, the animation has a lot of squash and stretch, and especially with characters like Lanky Kong, which I think honestly it's a little more appropriate for Lanky Kong than it is for some of the others, and I wish that aesthetic and animation style had been limited to those arenas, but it was pretty much cast wide.
Now, it wasn't as much of a Western cartoon pastiche as Conker would become in Bad Fur Day, but it's definitely, I've always compared the three major franchises of the Donkey Kong universe. That's Donkey Kong, Banjo, and Conker. Donkey Kong is an old adventure serial by way of a National Geographic documentary. Banjo is a fractured fairy tale, and Conker is a Western animation Tex Avery cartoon.
Well, yeah, but that really only applies to the first entry of those respective series.
Still, it's a good ground floor. I mean, it's a good way of wrapping your head around what each one has to say, and sure, they deviate after that. But
I think that especially for Banjo, and I'm sure the Banjo comparison is going to come up a lot in this episode, but for Banjo, to say that the Banjo series is a fractured fairy tale is doing a massive disservice to the Banjo series.
I believe that's the way you described it, probably when we did a Banjo Spotlight episode.
Yeah, when we did a Banjo-Kazooie Spotlight episode. But looking at the Banjo series as a whole, and especially paying reverence to Banjo-Tooie.
And Banjo Pilot.
And Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. Well,
and Banjo-Kazooie, Grunty's Revenge
Missions. Thank you, yes. Banjo-Tooie took it beyond that fractured fairy tale mode.
Yeah.
And mold. And I feel like that is the mark of game auteurs who know what they're doing and yes, I know the word auteur.
Let's take a drink, everybody.
All right, yep. Banjo-Tooie is what happens when you have developers that have something to say about their genre, and we touched on this last week, but I don't want us, even in a passing conversation, to refer to the Banjo series as a fractured fairy tale, because it became so much more than that. That was the jumping off point.
But I still think, even in Tooie, which I will fully admit, it definitely went in a entirely expanded direction that's went far beyond the scope, the thematic scope of Banjo-Kazooie. I'll still say that it still had it in, if not its DNA, it still had a little bit of it in its bone marrow, just a little bit.
To me, it was the origin, and yes, it needed to still exist because, Cheeto is there in Grunty's lair, and Grunty's lair is a thing. But when you got outside of Spiral Mountain into the Isle of Hags, it was a living, breathing world, and all of the artificial trappings of the fractured fairy tale video game were gone, and in doing that, Banjo grew beyond its original constraints.
I'll agree with that. This is just an easy shorthand. I know you are a particular fan of Banjo-Tooie at the moment. You've been playing it in addition to playing Donkey Kong 64.
Yes, and that's another part of why I might not be so favorable in this episode regarding Donkey Kong 64, because I have been comparing it even subconsciously to Banjo-Tooie, the Banjo series, Mario 64, Mario Galaxy, all other 3D platformers.
Now, you don't think that's comparing apples to exploding oranges?
No, I think it's more apt than that, although I do appreciate that joke. No, I think it's perfectly valid to compare Donkey Kong 64 to its contemporaries, and I think that there are some key reasons why it falls short, but there are also some fundamental things in Donkey Kong 64 that it does very well.
Yes, and one of those things, I believe, is the dynamic lighting.
All right.
Now, this is something that I think is often overlooked with what Rare was doing back in the late 90s.
Sure.
Each major game they released would have this one technical, I don't want to say innovation, but technical I don't know.
Accoutrement.
Thank you. I'm an American. I don't speak that damn Islamic French. But
there are a lot of Islamists in France word land. Yeah.
Anyway, so I this game had it, but like looking back at Diddy Kong Racing, I remember one of the things Rare was really touting back then was that the characters were fully animated and they would actually react to what's going on around them.
Yeah.
And that's something that Mario Kart just caught up with, kind of. I mean, all those memes of Luigi looking like he's gonna murder you, Diddy Kong Racing did it first. I mean, maybe not to the degree Mario Kart did, but this was back in 1997 on the N64.
The only difference is that Luigi has independently animated eyebrows that can lower. That's really the innovation. I mean, in Diddy Kong Racing, you had characters swivel their heads, and that's what Mario Kart does. The characters look at the active thing going on.
Yeah, but it was still a big deal, and it was touted in all the video game magazines at the time. 6 months later, Banjo-Kazooie, one of the huge selling points was that the music changed when the environment changed. So for example, you scale Treasure Trove Cove, the music gets more distant. You go underwater and the music becomes muffled. So small things we take for granted now, but Rare really pushed that stuff and was oftentimes first. So with Donkey Kong 64, one of the big selling points was the dynamic lighting. And I brought up the whole Donkey Kong is this, Banjo is this, Conker is this, because I said this game more or less resembles a Tex Avery cartoon, but that's not completely accurate, because this game, with this dynamic lighting, could, at least visually, be moody as hell. This game was surprisingly visually dark and kind of...
Yes, but I also don't want to use dark as a positive term because, all right, I spent...
No, I'm not saying it's a positive term.
No,
I'm using it as a neutral term.
Right.
I'm not saying like dark, like, oh man, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice is going to be so dark, man.
Does Donkey Kong 64 bleed?
Actually, it's got jaundice.
Well, only Donkey Kong can pick up the jaundice.
Yeah, that's true.
No, I just got done playing Donkey Kong 64 myself.
You just beat it?
Okay. I would love if that was the only thing you got upon beating it completely, was just DK saying, okay. Similar to the Donkey Kong Land, congratulations.
Yeah.
But no, I was basically in prep for this. I was running through my old 101% file on the 64 and walking through some of these stages, and I just... Man, there are some really fundamental problems with this game, and I think that they supersede discussion about the worlds themselves. So,
okay, well, do you have a problem with the lighting then? Because that's what I was trying to get at.
Well, no, I think the lighting is amazing, and and it's really fantastic, and is a great innovation of Rare on the N64 that they could not only create multiple lighting sources, but create shadows that respond to those sources, and create lighting sources that have different colors, and the coloration is something that I think still sets DK64 apart from its contemporaries.
Yeah, I mean, what I want to say is in the plus column, now obviously this wasn't the graphical leap that Donkey Kong Country was, but it was still very, very pretty for an N64 game. Because let's be honest, the N64, as much as we love and cherish it, it was at the forefront of polygonal video games, and it kind of was ugly more often than not. Mm-hmm. But Donkey Kong 64, man, they really made it look swell.
Well,
all right.
So,
I mean, okay.
So listen, I played Frantic Factory, Angry Aztec, Jungle Japes, Gloomy Galleon, even Fungi Forest, that I remembered being very bright, happy, these stages are dark, literally dark.
And this was the N64 version, because there are some complaints that the Virtual Console version is even darker than the original game.
I'm not talking about the VC version at all. This is me playing it on my N64 with a television, mind you, that I have calibrated to play Banjo-Tooie, because that's the other game that I'm playing currently on my N64. This game is dark and watered down and washed out and dull and gray and depressing.
Yeah, the colors, I'll grant you that. I think visually it's very impressive. However, especially compared to Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, the color scheme is completely washed out.
It's muted. You go into Gloomy Galleon, and granted, I was going to get into this when we talked about the stages individually, but every fucking stage in this game, you're presented with a hallway. You know, you don't walk in like Banjo-Kazooie and click clock wood. It's like, all right, I've stepped into this arena and now I walk into spring and there's a giant tree in front of me. No. What you do in Donkey Kong 64 is you walk into a closed off lobby and you get past B locker and then you find yourself in a hallway. And I guess I'll find my way out of this hallway, and then there's some more stuff to do. There are no moments where you have this sense of awe. There's no grandeur. Donkey Kong 64 presents everything as an apology. It's like the game says...
An apology?
Yes, it's like the game is, well, yeah... We have this stage called Fungi Forest. You know, it's really complicated. Don't worry about it for right now. You know, how about you deal with this hallway? And yeah, and then I guess we'll expose a little of the rest of it to you. It's like the game is ashamed of itself. And
that's an interesting interpretation.
I don't understand why everything in Donkey Kong 64 is introduced in this like middling piecemeal way. Like if you want to have a giant...
I was gonna argue with you. I was gonna say, well, Jungle Japes, you start out right in the open, but that's not true. You are in the open, but then you have to go through a hallway to get to the main part.
Exactly. Every part of this game, there's like this weird linear hallway that eventually exposes a little bit, but then even when you get into the big quote-unquote open arena, there are rooms that you have to go through. And like I this afternoon I was walking through Crystal Caves and I found this igloo. And granted, the last time I was in Crystal Caves was in 1999. It has been a long time. So a lot of this was refreshing my memory.
And by the way, just to clear things up for our listeners, Crystal Caves isn't where Crystal cosplayers keep all their treadmills.
No. That's in a whole different set of caves. There was an igloo that had 5 things that... There were 5 blocks on this igloo. One of them was a grape. One was a red feather. One was a coconut. One was a peanut. One was whatever the other one I'm missing is. A pea or
Did you say pineapple?
A pineapple, Chunky Kong, yeah. And basically you would hit the side of the thing and it would open up and you go into it. And then that's the continuate. Like, everything...
You're just so exhausted. You're so beaten down by it.
I am, and that's what's so discouraging about this game. This is Donkey Kong 64. This is the 3D realization of the Donkey Kong franchise, and this game has me sighing.
But it's not the 3D realization of the franchise. That's the point we're ultimately coming down on.
Right.
It's a 3D game in the franchise.
Yeah. I guess that's true. And that's why I hope that, you know, if Camelot does take a crack at this thing, they have learned some lessons from whatever the fuck this game was.
All right. Well, we're going to get into the worlds here. And by the way, we're not going to be giving detailed walkthroughs of the worlds, nor are we going to. It's not going to be like.
Are you telling me that if anyone is interested in beating Rodney the Hare, they should tune out right now?
Well, and we're also not going to be getting super in depth like we did with, like, say, the Tropical Freeze First Impressions episodes, where we're going, because this is not going to be a 10-part spotlight episode. This is going to be done after this episode. We're going to be touching on the basics, some of the memorable things, some of the things we liked, which I'm guessing from your point of view right now is going to be few and far between, and some of the things we disliked. But before we get to the worlds, I think we should touch upon the multiplayer, because that was it's kind of an oft forgotten bit of Donkey Kong 64, so much so that I forget it's there. I mean, I remember unlocking Krusha as a character, which was really weird because he's not anywhere in the actual game. He's kind of been supplanted by Kazblat.
Yeah. And I really liked the multiplayer in this game. There was one arena, I forget its name, but basically there's a slightly risen central area with 4 spools coming off. A-lads. And I remember spending a fuckload of time with my friends in high school playing the multiplayer for this game. And
wait, your friends in high school?
I had multiple friends in high school. I had 2. And then ultimately, when Conker's Bad Fur Day came out, that was basically we switched over to playing colors, but which was like the capture the flag mode in Conker.
Oh, okay.
But the DK64 multiplayer was pretty solid for what it was, and the music for it, that do 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 do. The multiplayer music for DK64 was amazing. That's one thing that, like, before we get too far into this, and before I shit all over all the stages that we talk about, I want to be clear.
By the way, if you're a fan of Donkey Kong 64, this is a treat for you, I'm sure.
I want to be very clear that and I apologize for the awkward pauses, but I want to formulate my thoughts correctly. In my mind, Donkey Kong 64 is less than the sum of its parts. I think that the music is amazing.
The sum of its parts. The problem with Donkey Kong 64 is it's like 20 different equations that have no bearing on each other.
Right. The music is amazing. The lighting, as you so adamantly pointed out, is amazing. The animation is amazing. In most instances. Because sometimes Armadillo just flops over, and that means death, I guess. There are a lot of elements in Donkey Kong 64 that demonstrate extreme artistry and capability and expertise, and I don't want to denigrate any of those things. But when we're talking about a video game, the window into that world it's not just the viewport that our TV screen is in. It's also the control scheme and the mechanism that we have to control the characters in the game. And I feel like there are some very fundamental issues with the way that you control the characters in Donkey Kong 64.
Really?
Yeah. It's absurd to me that in a game that's based on a hop and bop platformer, that you can't jump more than like twice your character's height.
Yeah, well, that's actually a problem you had back in 1999, because I distinctly remember having this conversation with you.
Yeah,
back in the afterglow of the orgasmic first playthroughs of Donkey Kong 64.
So this was the refractory period.
Right, where we were making pillow talk, said, oh, baby, I'm going to give you 10.0 out of 10. Screw IGN, baby, I'll treat you right.
Yeah, baby, hey, it doesn't matter. Monica, Hillary don't need to know about Banjo-Kazooie. This is just you and me, baby.
Hey, baby, look, I know we were supposed to use the stop and swap method, but I just decided to come right in you. I had, my expansion pack just couldn't handle it. I had to unload all that extra memory somewhere.
I know we got all kinds of star company going on here, but I just want you to forget about Kenneth Starr.
That was a stretch.
Oh, come on. The whole bit was a stretch. The whole bit was a stretch. At least I made a reference.
Yeah, it was a stretch like Lanky Kong's arms.
Okay.
But you know what? I can make an orangutan with my penis.
Yep. No,
right,
that is no less of a stretch than the Kenneth Starr joke that I made.
Well, we'll let history be the judge, won't we?
All right.
You were saying.
I don't know what I was saying.
You said the characters, the jump. Oh, we were discussing that, the characters couldn't jump. They couldn't hop and bop. They couldn't land on enemies with
they
any
could.
precision.
And well, okay, with precision. So that's the bit. I realize now, in playing Donkey Kong 64 as a youth, I had always tried, the first enemy you encounter. It's that naughty standing outside of Jungle Japes out on DK Isles. You run up to him.
Shades of Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah. You run up to, I guess. You run up to Naughty, and you do what? You try and jump on him. And you barely crest the top of his eyeballs, and you get bounced back. Takes a melon away. Takes a melon piece. So I guess then you try and hit him. And guess what? That works. Great. Move on. You clearly can't jump high enough to jump on Naughties, or at least that's the assumption. And then as I was replaying this, I realized that, actually they did code it so that you can defeat enemies by jumping on them. If you do like a backflip, you can jump on Naughties. You can jump on critters. You can kill them that way. The problem is, the fucking game doesn't let you jump that high.
Right. Well, I mean, this was after Sammy Hagar took over Van Halen. And at this point, they decided, maybe we might as well jump.
Go ahead and not jump.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something like that. But this is a complaint you had back in 1999, which
I don't remember having that complaint, but I'm glad I did, because that tells me that at least I'm slightly consistent while saying this is the greatest game ever made.
Yeah, it wasn't enough to deduct even a 0.1 fraction of a review score.
No, I deducted 0.4 points, but I was rounding up.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is something, and I remember I was defending. I was like, well, you can jump on the Naughties, Chad. You can. It's just, it takes some timing, and it's 3D. The reason it's hard for you is because this is 3D. You have to factor in all those other dimensions.
All those other one dimensions.
I was full of shit, and I think we don't need to atone for that. We made light of that last week.
Right. So, well, do you feel like my concern is valid? I mean,
yes and no. I feel like it's valid in that this is a Donkey Kong game. I feel like if this was its own entity, if Donkey Kong 64 had no Donkey Kong Country to precede it, I feel like then it wouldn't be valid because whatever.
No, absolutely fair. Yes, but here's the thing. This game was a continuation of the Donkey Kong Country series, and it was a reappropriation of the Banjo-Kazooie 3D platformer model. And I think that I think that it even embraces, or it tries to embrace, those two things. But I think it fails at both of those things. We've already detailed how it fails at being the hop and bop rhythm-based platformer that was Donkey Kong Country. But it also fails at reappropriating Banjo, in that the controls in this game are so much looser and so much more, I hate to use a word as undescriptive as wonky, but the controls are fucking wonky in this game. You move the camera. There were a few moments that just fucking frustrated me to no end, and I wish that I had been like Twitch streaming so that others could see what I was going through. But like, I would go, you know that bit where there are like 3 vines that lead you to the entrance to Angry Aztec on DK Isles?
You know, I do, but I also know anytime you're swinging from multiple vines, it's an issue.
That's that exactly, and that's what happened. Like, I not only did I have trouble swinging on the vines, I had trouble getting onto the fucking vines because I would run up to the vine and I would see the vine right in front of me, and I knew from past experience playing Jungle Japes that, hey, if I run up to the vine, the camera's probably going to swing around and I'm going to jump into empty space. Mm-hmm. So I hit C up. I lined up the vine. I hit C up again to back the camera back out. So I was now facing the vine. I hit R on the control stick or on the controller to line up the camera right behind me. And I'm like, okay, everything is exactly dead center. Mind you, all of these things I should not have to do. This is me being a savvy gamer. And then I started running toward this vine, and guess what happened? The camera fucking winged around to the side, and I jumped into empty air and hit nothing.
You got to take your time with vine swinging in this game.
It's not vine swinging. It's just getting onto the fucking vine. You can't even. Oh, Jesus Christ! There is so much shit in this game that was just driving me up a wall, and that's what's so frustrating because there's so much great content and great music, great animation, great characterization in this game.
I'm glad you say that because it's like. It's sounding like you're just totally coming down on everything about it.
That's the problem, is that and that's what is ultimately so frustrating, is that there is so much great in Donkey Kong 64 that is obscured by this fucking horrendous control scheme and tag-a-barrel system and all of that. But it's ultimately, to me, like, it boils down to the window in which you play the game. And to me, it's not that visual port like I talked about earlier. It's the control scheme. And when the control that I have over the character, my avatar for exploring this world, when I am boxed in to such a degree, it makes it very difficult to enjoy what's going on.
Well, as far as vine swinging goes, I'll cop to how frustrating it is because replaying it on the virtual console, that's the part that I didn't just pick right back up on instinct. Like, that threw me for a loop.
But wait, Hyle, Cranky Kong gave you a training barrel. You should have been an expert by now.
With vine swinging, I feel like what they should have done is, instead of making it absolutely infuriating and difficult, they should have just said if you jump in the general direction of a vine, you'll latch onto it. Like, you should have just zeroed in on it without trying.
Right. Instead of, like, you have to literally fucking touch that vine, and even if the camera has decided that you are now moving in a different direction, you should still touch the vine.
You know, and vine swinging is such a essential part of the DKC experience that I can understand the problems they may have had replicating it in 3D.
Well, certainly they had a fundamental artistic problem because all the vines are these hover vine things.
At least they play with that and do call them hover vines. Like, it's not just...
It's so stupid.
It's not just...
so fucking stupid.
It's stupid. There's a lot of... concessions made
and you know
artistically in this game.
And I don't want us to give that a pass because listen, dude, come on. Let's hold ourselves accountable. We spent 6 or 7 episodes talking about Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, where we relentlessly praised the fact that Retro Studios understood what was great about the Donkey Kong Country series and how everything made logistical sense in the background. There were mechanical objects that created a cause and effect that resulted in what happened. And yet, in Donkey Kong 64, they fucking abandoned that.
Okay, but hovervines isn't part of that equation. They've got little helicopter blades on the top.
Oh, okay. Well, you know what? By that logic, we should have been okay with like the level from Autumn Heights where there are leaves that come up. We should have just been okay with a little helicopter blade behind those leaves instead of those being tucks blowing on their horns, elevating those leaves in time with the music. Like we praised it in that game, but we give it a free pass in DK64. Fuck that, I say.
Oh, geez.
I say fuck that.
Wow. Emotions running high over a children's game.
It is. I'm looking at Donkey Kong 64, and again, I don't want to throw the game's team onto the bus. I don't want to say George Andreas was misguided. What I see in this game is a compromise. This game is nothing but compromise.
Would you let me finish my thought on the damn hovervines?
All right.
It's a 3D game. Like, where are those vines going to be connected?
But that's a compromise. That's
on the N64.
compromise.
On the N64, it's not a compromise.
Then, hey, maybe they should have rejected the premise. Maybe there shouldn't be vine swinging in 3D because it doesn't make fucking sense.
For me, hovervines are so deliciously batshit crazy. It's like the bullshit fanon we come up with, like prosthetic golfing fingers. It's
a
goofy fun.
No, we come up with it because we're not in control of the games. These people are in control, and to me,
clearly they weren't.
That's the thing. That's why I don't want to throw them under the bus, because this is compromise defined. This is someone saying, we want to make a Donkey Kong game on the Nintendo 64. We tried to make it in our original vision, and it didn't quite work, but we're beholden to making it happen in this generation, so we got to do something, so I guess we're going to do this. It was, to me, Donkey Kong 64, and it shocks me that we didn't realize this when it came out. It feels like a game that it's a concession speech. This is not a victory lap. This is a concession speech. This is, yeah, the Banjo team really got it right, but this is what we have for you.
I think that's a retroactive way of looking at it.
Banjo-Kazooie is better than this thing.
I'm not saying Banjo-Kazooie isn't better than Donkey Kong 64. It obviously is. That's as close to a fact as you can get when it comes to critical opinion.
Right.
But what I'm saying is that
yeah.
To view Donkey Kong 64 as a concession speech or, well, we tried, but we failed, but here you go. I don't think that's what happened. I think that compromises were made, but I think that the biggest problem with it was and maybe this is me throwing them under the bus, and I don't mean to do that because I have the utmost respect for everybody who worked on this game, but I feel like it's just they didn't have as strong of a vision as Team Sutherland did.
Yeah.
And Team Males, it's...
I know. I think that's exactly right. I feel like they...
I feel like they... While the Banjo team got to make the game they wanted to make, while the Conquer team got to make the game they wanted to make, I feel like this team was almost saddled with the property, and I say that as
the Donkey Kong franchise was an albatross around their necks.
Look, if anybody wants to argue this with me, I think I've earned my credentials as one of the biggest Donkey Kong fans on the planet. So I'm not saying I'm not saying that like the franchise is an albatross. I'm not.
You hear that, nerds? DKVine.com/Facebook.
I'm not saying like the people who criticize Retro for making Tropical Freeze, like, oh, they're just being shackled with this series. No, I'm saying you could have made a good DK game, but this was not the team who had a vision for it, but they had to make it anyway.
Right.
I feel like somebody at Rare could have stepped up and said, no, this is the way you got to make Donkey Kong in 3D. I feel like this is just, oh, well, you're the last one standing here, so it's up to you. We got to have it out by the end of 99. Go.
Well, yeah, and I think that it was probably a situation where like they wanted to do something in their model, but like either the hardware wasn't really there for them, or I mean there were a lot of extenuating circumstances that prevented them from producing the game. That
sometimes creative visions just don't come together in time.
Yeah,
I mean it's a process, and sometimes it just doesn't happen, and that's a shame. But like you said, there's a lot of good things about this game. It's just
it's all obscured by this stuff.
There's no mission statement, and that's the problem. And but I don't feel like obviously that will affect your overall opinion of the game, but I don't think it should diminish what's good about it. Overall, like there's a lot I like about this game, and I feel like the only way we're going to touch upon that is if we start delving into the worlds.
Well, let's start there. Well, first let's talk about the overworld, Donkey Kong Isles.
It's essentially a world.
Yeah.
It's as much as a world as anything else.
Well, and it even has its own series of Casplats. So, I mean, yeah, it's basically a world.
Now, this is... Well, I don't know, like, this is what we would call a 3D map screen.
So is it a world, really? I mean, you're already trying to struggle to figure out, like, is this actually a world, or is it just an arbitrary assortment of polygons that restrict me from an end goal?
Here's the thing, like, I generally like what they tried to do here, but I...
what they tried, yeah. Uh-huh.
No, well, I feel like the major misstep is Donkey Kong Island, to make this work as a map screen or overworld.
Yeah.
They shrunk it down, they made it barren, so it looks like just a rock out at sea. There's like one or two like shrubs here or there, or rather like polygons that are kind of airbrushed green. It's just desolate.
That description of desolation, the barrenness, that's something that I feel like is going to be a recurring theme throughout this episode as we talk about the individual worlds, because that definitely stood out to me on DK Isles, and it's more appropriate on the Mechanical Crocodile Isle because it is mechanical,
and the Kremlings represent the antagonist. Like the Kongs are in tune with nature, the Kremlings seek to tear it down. That's been the MO since the original game.
Yes, but what you get for the quote-unquote natural elements is this just kind of open, barren, flat area, and there are some nice little touches.
Oh yeah,
like the water surface undulates. There are some neat little things. There are butterflies that fly around. There are little fishies, and I think that the closest though this game gets to the natural aesthetic that I think we both expected from it is from DK's Treehouse when you first start the game. That to me feels like a jungle world that I would like to explore. Mm-hmm. And then when you get to Jungle Japes, it ain't that.
Yeah. With the overworld, I think the problem that, it's all there. Like, the structure of Donkey Kong Island is the same, but, like, where Vine Valley is supposed to be, there are no trees. And you even made a theory about this back in 99. Well, the Kremlings cut down all the trees.
Did I really?
And I was like, no, we're not even suggesting that, because that's
no. That's a bridge too far.
Well, that was too
prosthetic golfing fingers are one thing, but the Kremlings would never cut down trees, except for in Donkey Kong Country 3.
The thing is, they wanted to have completely just deforested the entire island, because at that point, yeah, just blow the fucker up, because what are you fighting for, you know?
Yeah. And that dovetails back into what we were saying last week, where the game's plot had like 4 conflicting messages.
Yeah, I mean, my thing is, if you really want this plot to resonate, where K. Rool is going to blow up your island unless you defeat him in time, then you've got to make the island look more appealing than it does in this game. So the way I would have done the overworld, and I generally like the overworld in this game, I like what they were at least attempting to do, but what I would do is have a sliver of Donkey Kong Island be explorable, and then just block it off like they did Timber's Island in Diddy Kong Racing.
Sure.
And then in cutscenes you can see the whole island, whatever. But you don't need to scale the entire thing. That's just confusing to people.
I felt like the fact that there were that you would explore the island and go into a lobby. It wasn't immediately abhorrent, but then you get to Fungi Forest, and you get to Creepy Castle, and guess how you access those levels? Well, we ran out of space on the island, so I guess let's put this barrel here, and they can get blasted off to wherever the fuck they need to go. It all feels cobbled together. There's no unifying sense of design, and in playing Banjo-Tooie, that's one of the things that I have respected so much about that game.
Oh, even Kazooie, which this... Yeah. I think if you were to compare the way the game is structured, as far as you could walk through portals and you get transported to possibly far-off lands, we don't really know.
At least Gruntilda's lair makes logistical sense.
And everything is themed around that. Like, as you approach a world, or the entrance to a world, everything starts to shift in that aesthetic. There's this sense of purpose and place. And with this game, it's, okay, up here is going to be the arid desert on a tropical island.
And I guess, so we have like this forest thing that's definitely not a ripoff of Click Clock Wood. But we don't have a place to put it yet, so I guess there's a barrel cannon over there. Go jump in that, and that'll put you there. And like Creepy Castle. Why? If this is supposed to be an enemy territory thing, and I loved the fact that they split the worlds between DK Island and the Mechanical Crocodile Isle.
Yeah, but it still makes no sense.
It still makes no sense for that stage, Creepy Castle. Why not just make you climb higher on Mechanical Crocodile Isle? Instead, you have to find a barrel cannon that just blasts you into the fucking sky.
Well, why would there be like a centuries-old castle on top of the newly built Mechanical Crocodile Isle to begin with?
Yeah.
Like, my problem with it is that, like, me, I'm Mr. Continuity, Mr. Fanon, Mr. Making this universe make sense, which to its credit, it usually does without much effort. But
and also that has been a less than popular stripping calendar series. Mr. Making the Donkey Kong universe make sense.
Yeah, it's just me and Jeff.
You, Jeff, Saf, and Sean.
But I mean, I try to make sense of this, and even I've just given up with this game. I'm like, they're just separate realms, like Banjo-Kazooie. I literally can't be bothered because it's just too much of a hassle. Even Jungle Japes, I'm like, fuck it. It's not on Donkey Kong Island. I don't know where it is. Yeah. Screw it. And this is not what I had in mind in any capacity when I imagined what a 3D DK game would be like.
Do you have any idea why we gave it such hyperbolically positive reaction? Was it just that we had already set ourselves up for that, or
we were 15, 14, and we were desperately looking forward to this game, and there's no way the game could be a disappointment because Rare never had disappointed us up until this point. And we were already fighting franchise wars where we've you got to root for the home team.
Yeah.
And so that just all came together. It was the first 3 months of DK Bind, too. So it all came together in us being...
insane.
Well, I was going to say zealots, but yeah, insane.
Yeah.
No, but when I imagined this as a kid, this overworld was definitely not in any sort of vision I had. I pictured a 3D Donkey Kong game to either have map screens like the SNES games, where you then had like smaller 3D worlds within, and I've discussed this before. I still think this is the way to go.
Well,
kind of like how the Super Mario 3D world has taken it.
And what we have recently learned via Twitter is that the original design doc for DK64, or Donkey Kong World as it was known then, was...
I still prefer that name, by the way.
Yeah, it was kind of along those lines.
Yeah, or I wanted something like Banjo-Tooie.
Right.
Funny enough, because I wanted like just a huge interconnected world with like really no breaks. Obviously, there would have to be like loading and but like Banjo-Tooie, where it's all one interconnected, living, breathing environment. Like I pictured maybe it could just be the entire Congo jungle, just a massive jungle. Yeah. I didn't want something like Super Mario 64, where the limitations of what you're working with are apparent.
Right.
And
the obstacle course.
Yeah, I mean, this game isn't quite an obstacle course. It's not as bad as that.
It is. Yeah, it is.
You're kind of feeling down on it, and maybe you feel like you have to...
Hang on. Okay, well, if we're talking about video games, let's back up and say that the terminology of obstacle course is not necessarily a pejorative.
Wait, we're talking about video games?
Yeah.
Oh,
every now and then.
I thought this was the farm report.
The farm watch. No. It's not a bad thing for a game to be constructed around obstacle courses, but what the Donkey Kong Country series did in its brilliance was obscure those video game elements in such a way that you didn't realize you were encountering them. But Donkey Kong 64, it's nothing but video game tropes and arbitrary restrictions.
Yeah.
You know, there is no sense of that I am playing in a living, breathing world. At least after you, I'd say that exists when you're in DK's treehouse area. Once you exit there, you're basically playing a bald video game.
I think that's a little bit too harsh. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Okay, well, let's move beyond DK Isles and discuss Jungle Japes specifically.
Okay.
All right. So, this is the world where, you start it as Donkey Kong and you ultimately unlock Diddy very quickly. I don't know. To me, this was yet another lost opportunity to represent a jungle. And yeah, some of it might have been hardware restrictions, but then you also have to question, why did you attempt it in the first place?
It's a Donkey Kong game, and you've got to have a jungle. Sakurai style, baby.
I guess, I look at Banjo-Tooie, and Mayahem Temple feels like more of a jungle than Jungle Japes does.
Mumbo's Mountain feels like more of a jungle than Jungle Japes. And to be fair, there's a few worlds that I do hold up in higher esteem than the other worlds of DK64. Yeah. Jungle Japes is one of those worlds where I believe it feels like a Donkey Kong world. Now, the execution we can argue about until we're blue in the face, and then only Lanky Kong can collect our face.
Right.
But I think that Jungle Japes, I never felt like this feels tonally off. It felt consistent.
Really?
Yeah, I felt like it felt consistent with what came before and what would come after. It felt like what a Donkey Kong world is, even if you could argue that, oh, it's a jungle, it was more barren, there were hallways, whatever, but I didn't have a problem with that. I like the world generally. I like what they tried to do with the world generally, and I feel like the game doesn't get stale for me in Jungle Japes.
To me, the Jungle Japes, it was the first indication that something was amiss, and maybe it didn't send that home, because you walk into you have to get your guns, of course. And then and then you can shoot open.
They've got to exercise their Second Amendment rights, Chad.
I'm sorry. That's true. That's true. I wouldn't ever want to, restrict the right of the Kong clan to have a well-regulated militia.
I mean, the Blast-O-Matic, that's a false flag event, Chad.
Clearly.
Clearly. Obama's pulling the strings. Jade Helm 15. Read the literature.
I'm sorry. Clearly, I haven't. Maybe we should get Adam Baldwin to chime in.
Oh no!
But I these rotten monkeys. I felt like playing this. It really started to. It revealed itself to me upon replaying it that
it has been revealed that Chad doesn't like Donkey Kong 64. Brought to you by Quiznos.
It was less than toasty. I remember this place with Cranky where it was raining and stuff, and you got Ramby.
That weird little grotto.
That grotto where it's inexplicably raining for no reason, and then but you also have to go through a whole bunch of really drab, dark hallways where you can't really control your camera.
Not drab. At least they have color. They have color.
They had color in the bananas that you couldn't collect. There was no other color. It was brown. It was fucking brown. I'm sorry, but dude, the art direction on this game was so inconsistent.
Brown is a color.
It is technically a color, yeah. It's when you combine all the colors because you can't decide what the fuck you want to do. It was really discouraging to...
tunnels are brown in real life. Tunnels carved out of mountainside.
Yeah, but generally, when I want to play a tunnel in a Donkey Kong game, I would hope that it's a kind of bonus level-esque area like it was in Donkey Kong Country, and I can run through it in 30 seconds, grab my balloon, and then pop back out into a jungle. Instead, you walk through this drab area, you're confronted with a drab area where there's a bunch of rain pouring, and you can't even, and that's another problem, man, the draw distance in this game, you can't even see Cranky's hut, you can't see the trees that you need to get to. You walk into this area and there's nothing in front of you, and only if you adjust the camera to make it unplayably close to the Kong, or if you approach the thing, does it make itself apparent to you. It's like the gameplay and the hardware were holding this game back to an unplayable degree.
Well, they should have really used the expansion pack.
You know what? Maybe if they had actually used the expansion pack to preload objects and textures into the RAM, then they wouldn't have had such difficulties. But the expansion pack was only there in Donkey Kong 64 to prevent that one game-stopping bug.
See, for me, Jungle Japes, I enjoyed it, and replaying it recently on the Virtual Console, I enjoyed Jungle Japes.
What did you enjoy about it?
I just I don't know. You want reasons?
Yeah, I want you to tell me how Jungle Japes made you feel like you were playing a Donkey Kong game in 3D.
Because I was playing a Donkey Kong game in 3D. That's what it is.
You literally were doing that, but how did it rejuvenate that part of your brain? How did it tap into that feeling of, oh yeah, this is what Donkey Kong Country is in 3D?
No, absolutely not, because that's not what this game is. But for what this game is, and this game is Donkey Kong 64. It's its own beast, and
yeah.
See, for me, just playing as Donkey and Diddy in Jungle Japes, the game didn't reveal itself to be the watered down, inconsistent, left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing kind of glorious mess that the entire experience is. It was smaller scale. It was more or less enjoyable. There's some parts I kind of was like shooting down the balloons.
Or maybe when you get into that hallway off of the left side of the game and of the stage, and you realize, oh, there's a feather block in front of this.
This is for tiny, but luckily there's like 3 Casplats in here, so I can. It's. I recognize what you're saying, and I'm not.
And I agree with what you're saying in that Jungle Japes is probably the least offensive of the stages, probably because you didn't yet know what you were getting into.
Yeah, and it's kind of a slow reveal, but
yeah.
As far as aesthetics go, I like it. I don't have the same problem with the tunnels that you do. I really don't.
Really, you. See, to me,
for me, that's just a design choice.
Okay, but I feel like it's a bad design choice. Because listen, hang on.
Well, comparing it to Banjo, you can say yes, I prefer the way Banjo does it, but I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with the way DK64 does it.
I do, because I feel like when you're and I'm particularly talking about the entrances to these worlds and the fact that there's this weird tunnel on basically every Donkey Kong 64 world.
Now, do you think they did that because the reasons you said, the draw distance, loading? Like,
probably.
They couldn't reveal the whole world or else there'd be nothing there.
It was either that or perhaps those initial linear areas were artifacts of the game that they had to ditch. I don't know. But when I'm playing Banjo, I enter a new world. To me, that's an accomplishment in and of itself. You know, you have unlocked a new area, and you want to have a little bit of a reward before you dive in. So what does Banjo do? You walk into Hailfire Peaks, and guess what? Holy shit! There's this volcano-scape ahead of you. If you go into See Up, you can see the whole fucking world, aside from the ice side, which is its own, basically, giant world. You walk into Jolly Roger's Lagoon. It's a living, breathing, little village right there in front of you. You don't have to walk through this weird tunnel to get there. You know, that to me is a fundamental artistic issue with the way that Donkey Kong 64's worlds were constructed.
But art is subjective. I mean, look.
Well, yes, that is a true statement. Art is subjective. What's your preference? Tell me. Can you defend this decision over giving you a sense of grandeur and visual reward when you've unlocked a level? Tell me how you defend Donkey Kong 64 to me.
Look, I prefer the way Banjo does it and the way Banjo Tooie does it.
Great.
But
then why say art is subjective? Because yes, that is a literal and ultimately meaningless statement. But here, the point of this show is to judge art.
Yes, but I'm just one person. I'm not going to hold Donkey Kong 64 at fault because it does something differently than Banjo.
No, but that's the thing. All art does things differently, but we're trying to evaluate whether or not the artistic decision was ultimately a benefit or a detriment to the work as a whole.
Honestly, it doesn't bother me.
I'm saying it's a detriment. You're saying it doesn't bother you.
It doesn't bother me because, honestly, it does make the game a little bit more linear, and that's what this game desperately needed.
It doesn't, though? Because all it does is it has a little linear section that sort of removes my enthusiasm, and then I'm confronted with all the non-linear shit I gotta collect.
Well, I think you were actually spot on. I think it may be an artifact of the earlier build of the game. and then kind of sledgehammered into the broader 3D Banjo-esque Super Mario 64 wannabe that it became.
Yeah.
And, I want to see more of that linear Donkey Kong 64 because now I don't want to see all like dark tunnels with swinging lights. I want to see
and helicopter vines.
I want to see a gorgeous jungle canopy that maybe extends downwards and you're on like a trail.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see something like that, and maybe
Tropical Freeze did a lot right. And granted, Tropical Freeze had hardware that the DK64 team could have only dreamed of.
And Tropical Freeze is also a 2D game.
It's a 2D game that I think exposed 3D elements smartly.
Yeah, that came out 15 years later, like you said, on more advanced hardware.
Right.
I mean, that's not a fair comparison.
I think there were also some decisions, though, that the DK64 team could have made to make this game a little more playable. I don't want to say playable because that sounds flippant, but
it's playable.
It is technically playable.
You and I have both beaten this game.
Yeah,
Cameron Regal, our good friend and DK Vine staffer Cameron Regal, just beat the game last night
on the virtual console, no less.
Yeah.
I feel like the most successful segments of this game, and we're technically still talking Jungle Japes, the minecart section, and that was entirely linear, and it felt effective, it felt familiar, and it felt new. It had all of those good markings of a good game. It reminds you of that nostalgic thing, but it advances it, and it gives you a new gameplay challenge. And I really feel like the minecart sections succeeded.
And that's where I would agree that Tropical Freeze does take from this game, where it's the 3D minecart sections, definitely.
Yeah. So, well, anything else to add about Jungle Japes?
Armadillo, I liked him.
Yeah, that was a good boss.
Yeah, and, I like that, armies aren't in this game, but I like that they had the sense of continuity and canon and history that we're going to finally make a giant army boss, even if armies aren't just regular enemies in the game. They aren't, right? I'm not like misremembering that.
No, you're correct. Although there are these strange elements in this game and in Tui where when I was a kid, that bit that we talked about in Jungle Japes where you have to get tiny to get in there and then you shrink down. There's this big shell. I never really understood what that was supposed to be, and there's something like that in Banjo-Tooie as well. When I was a kid, I thought that was an armadillo shell. But I guess, but when you get in there, there's kind of this opalescence. So I guess it's supposed to be a giant, snail shell, a conch shell or something. But yeah, I think that was not the developer's intent for that to be an armadillo shell. So yeah, armadillo is probably the only example in the game.
I'm pretty sure that there were armies in the game that were cut, because there's a lot of cut content. Yeah? There was gonna be what this orange bouncing Kremlins for Donkey Kong Country 3. Recoil?
Yeah, Recoil.
Yeah. They were gonna be in the game.
They were, yeah, until our hypothetical Miyamoto issued an edict saying nothing but DKC1.
No, I think
we don't know if that's true or not,
because they were found, at least in the background data of the kiosk demos for DK64. So I think that they were ultimately cut because having a jumping enemy in this game where you can't jump, I think it just made it too clunky.
Playing this thing, I think one of the most frustrating things is that I can't jump high enough. And Janelle was watching as I was playing this evening, and I did a backflip. And the backflip jumps 3 times as high as your normal jump does. And she said, "That's way too high." And I said, "Oh yeah, watch this." And I jumped normally. She said, "That's way too low." Make the backflip a little lower, make the regular jump a little higher, and if they would have emphasized head bopping on enemies as a primary way to defeat them, I feel like this game probably would have had a lot more going for it. It would have felt much more fast-paced. It would have felt much less like a Banjo-esque, move-based, weapon-based, item-based platformer. In the Donkey Kong Country series, there were no items. You didn't fight anyone with guns. You didn't use peanut pop guns. You didn't use orange grenades. You jumped on enemies to defeat them. And this game all but removed that basic fundamental mechanic.
Yeah. In retrospect, the guns were a really weird choice.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we need projectiles because Kazooie can shoot eggs. I don't know how much correlation there was between Banjo-Kazooie and DK64, other than we know that there was going to be a stop and swap connection at one point, which is also really weird.
Yeah. I'll tell you this: in replaying it, why is there a ground pound?
Well, there's those switches.
Yeah, there are switches that require a ground pound. There's an arbitrary gating mechanism. Can you tell me how many times did you defeat an enemy using a ground pound?
Well, I'll have to scan my brain over the 80 hours it took to beat the game originally.
Right, but can you think of any instances off the top of your head?
No, of course not.
Yeah, because, well, and the problem is you can't jump high enough to effectively make a ground pound a usable move. And yet there was a ground pound. Why? Because Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie had a ground pound. It was all this game was a reaction to the 3D platformers that preceded it. It wasn't charting any new territory in that genre.
And that's ultimately where I find fault with this game, because Rare famously, and some people would argue with this, but those people aren't my friends. Rare famously would take Nintendo concepts, refine them, and make and perfect them, make them go into directions Nintendo never would have. Put a Western spin on them. They did it with Banjo.
Which is a definitely not racist thing to say.
No, but I mean the humor and maybe the story elements definitely would have never come out of Nintendo of Japan.
Sure.
It just wouldn't. I mean, it's a different culture.
Yeah, well, yeah. I think that especially the Lee Loveday influence in the Cranky Kong characterization, like that self-deprecatory tone,
right?
That was really. I think that's one of the Western things you're alluding to, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But so they did it. Diddy Kong Racing improved on Mario Kart, Super Mario Kart actually. Banjo-Kazooie did it for Super Mario 64. Star Fox Adventures did its own thing from the Zelda formula. I would never dare say it did it better than Zelda.
Not even close.
But it definitely had different things to say.
I'll tell you. I'll say what Star Fox Adventures did better than its Zelda contemporaries. It was a more interesting story and characterization, and it had way better graphics than the GameCube era Zeldas.
And the music, don't forget the music.
And the music, of course. And that's another analog actually between Star Fox Adventures and DK64. Less than the sum of its parts.
Yes, although I feel like Star Fox Adventures was a lot more successful at you didn't see the seams so much.
Until you got to the General Scales fight.
That doesn't bother me. Anyway, so my point is, Donkey Kong 64 didn't do that. It was a follower. It was a blind follower. So it was trying to follow in the footsteps of Super Mario 64 and even Rare's own Banjo-Kazooie. But then, because it was blind, it ended veering up, off into the forest, where it was lost and eventually died from exposure.
Yeah, and I feel like,
Excuse me, there was no forest because all the trees were gone.
That's right. It wound up in the empty void with rock walls around it.
There was a hovervine.
Well, let's talk Angry Aztec.
Okay, so Angry Aztec. This, Chad McCanna, this is where the game starts to bother me.
Oh boy! All right. Well, I hope you really cut loose now.
No.
Okay. So now you enter Angry Aztec. You have this arbitrary tunnel that removes all enthusiasm you had for entering a level called Angry Aztec, and now you enter into the level, except it's not really that level. And then you have another arbitrary hallway that you have to go through to get to Angry Aztec. Tell me what bugged you about this level.
Honestly, it's what this level, this world even is. This isn't even like a gameplay thing, although
Okay.
I think this is the world where things start to get tedious as fuck. This world, why Angry Aztec? Okay, so here's my...
So this is the ultimate trope, like the underlying theme of the level that you have a problem with.
Yeah, okay, so here's my theory. All right, so they're making a Donkey Kong game in 3D. Well, we got to get a jungle world in. They're looking at Donkey Kong Country. Well, people really like that ice cavern, so let's make
that.
Make one of those in 3D.
Yeah, even though it was only one stage in the original.
Right, but people loved it.
Yeah, it was good. It was dead good, and it had a great Evelyn Fisher score to it. Yeah.
So what's another defining feature of the original DKC? Well, the temples.
Yeah, those were great.
But they were. We need to come up with a gimmick to it, because those were just like generic. I get their Kremlin temples, sure, because they had the Kremlin statue heads, but. Let's do something else. Let's put a new spin on it. Let's make a fresh baby.
Mario had a desert, and there was the Egyptian thing in Banjo-Kazooie.
Yeah. Okay. So here's my thing. I think they were deciding, waffling between a temple and a desert, and Banjo did the Egyptian pastiche with Gobi's Valley. So they can't do Egyptian.
Right.
Well, what's another ancient culture?
Well, they can't do Mayan because...
Right.
At that time, I'm sure,
But here's the thing.
Greg Mayles would have smacked him upside the head.
Since when are the Aztecs in an Egyptian-style desert?
Yeah. Weren't the Aztecs in more of a jungle, kind of?
Yeah, and the Mayans, yeah.
And the Mayans, yeah.
But at least, Banjo-Tooie got that right.
Yeah.
I don't know what this world is. This is a mess, and conceptually, it makes no sense on what's established as Donkey Kong Island. Even if you say, okay, they're separate realms, it's still.
I'm sorry, Hyle. You mean okay? There are separate realms.
It doesn't. None of the talking about the parts not adding up to a great sum. This world is just a fucking mess. Like conceptually, visually. Why isn't it Angry Aztec? Who's the Angry Aztec? What is going on here? I don't like this world.
Who is the Angry Aztec? I think that's the guy who just wants you to get out.
Yeah, that was creepy. I like that part. But I don't know. This world just doesn't... This is the world. There are worlds that feel like Donkey Kong worlds, and there are worlds that feel like they belong in another game. For the most part, this world does not feel like it belongs in a Donkey Kong game.
I would agree with you there. I have very little to contribute to the discussion of Angry Aztec. I feel like it's yet another one of those stages where there's no cohesion to the whole thing. It feels like if I'm thinking of the process of designing this world, and I'm looking down, like they have a piece of graph paper and they're drawing out like the pathways from like a bird's eye view. And it's like, oh, here's a pathway. Here's a big circle where you can run around. Oh shit, we gotta have 25 bananas in this level, or I guess that was it, right? Yeah, 25 per world. We got 25 bananas here.
Oh my god, 25 per world.
I guess we'll put like, here's a temple, and you can each Kong can shoot their gun at the side of the temple, and then they'll get in, and then they'll do a thing.
See, that's the monotony. That is where you're just like, oh my god, I have to do this again.
Yeah, it's like you literally get to a temple, and there's a coconut icon on the temple, and there's a peanut icon,
and a feather,
pineapple,
and a
feather, and a grape. And And you hit it, and it gives you 10 seconds to get into the temple, and then you do a challenge for just that Kong, and then you
I hate this game. I hate
and
this
you
game.
exit the temple. Oh, and by the way, you better make sure that you shoot the 10 banana balloon or collect all the bananas for that Kong and the banana coins for that Kong before you exit. Otherwise, you got to go back and do it all again. And that occurs in basically every fucking world. There's
It was really bad in Angry Aztec.
It was really bad in the whole game.
No, but Angry Aztec is where it just jumps out at me, especially during my replay. And the thing is, Angry Aztec, like, the whole point is, yeah, there's these shifting desert sands out here, but you need to get into the temple. You need to get into the various temples, and that's where the bulk of the world takes place. And it is visually, this is where I agree with you, my friend. This is where it's visually drab. And to be fair, or not fair, to be unfair to Banjo-Tooie, I felt the same way about, like, Gruntilda Industries, Grunny Industries.
Play it again. Well, I would say, yeah, play it again, Sam. And we're about to get to the closer analog to Grunty Industries. Let's flip forward a stage to Frantic Factory.
Can I just say one more thing about Angry Aztec?
Please.
Why is there one Neki in the game that's like actually an enemy that you fight? One Neki.
Yeah, there's one. Okay, so you don't even really fight him. And I played this the other day, actually, and I didn't remember it at all. But yeah, you unlock Lanky, and then there's this one Neki that's flying around, and you shoot him with your grape gun like 5 times, and then he drops a banana.
He shrinks.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he shrinks
because this game is a cartoon.
Because this game makes no fucking sense.
But okay, so it's like they had a checklist, and it was they were nearing the end of development, and they're like, oh my god, we haven't gotten a Neki in the game.
And then we also have Skaver.
Skaver, you're right.
That's the name we gave to the one buzzard, the vulture.
I don't know anymore.
Yeah, that Diddy Kong flies around behind.
Does he? It's not a race. He just has to follow him.
He has to follow him and go through the hoops. And
that's all this game is going through hoops.
Yeah, you were. That is a literal realization of what this game is. Jumping through a series of arbitrary and increasingly frustrating hoops.
Anyway, so yeah, Angry Aztec. Honestly, probably my least favorite world in game. Well, maybe the next world.
So Frantic Factory. This one. Now, you made the comparison to Grunty Industries, and I feel like that's unfair because I hated Grunty Industries upon first playing it, but since I have replayed it with the clear nostalgia-free eyes of an adult, Grunty Industries is a lot of fun, and it makes a lot of sense, and the floors are themed, and it makes sense how you get from one to the other. And when you find something that's gated off, there's generally a clue that tells you why it's gated off, and so it tells you, oh, okay, maybe I need to. Okay, so I need to come back here with. When I'm transformed into the washing machine, because only the washing machine can use this lift. And, it's not just like all of a sudden you're walking down a hallway and you realize that hallway is full of red bananas and you're playing as Lanky Kong, And then you're like, well, for fuck's sake, I guess next time I find a tag barrel, I should backtrack for 5 minutes and go get all those Diddy bananas, and then I'll come back and switch back to Lanky Kong. There's nothing like that.
To be fair, I think that's the wrong way to play Donkey Kong 64, if you're going to think of it like that. What you got to do is play it as that Kong. Forget about everything else related to the other Kongs. Play each... Focus just exclusively on that Kong.
Well, but you can't even always do that, because a lot of the times, you're playing as Lanky, and you walk up to a pad, and you can't use that pad. Why? Because there's a an inflatable balloon move that you have yet to learn as Lanky Kong. So even if you approach it one Kong at a time, there's still a significant amount of backtracking you have to do. And that's not a problem in and of itself, because Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, well, Banjo-Tooie more so, have a great degree of backtracking, but I feel like that game, Banjo-Tooie, makes the backtracking interesting.
Yeah, I'll agree there. And that's the joy of the interconnected world.
Yeah. You feel like, even though you do have to go back to Witchy World to unlock, you have to go back to
Witchy World.
You have to go back to Glitter Gulch Mine to get the Saucer of Peril working. Like, it connects those two worlds, so you can walk straight through that. And also, it feels like you're augmenting a future world with this previous world. Like, the backtracking all makes an internal, consistent, logical sense.
Here you're just jumping from Petri dish to Petri dish.
Yes. So, yeah, I guess it's interesting that you use the phrase "the correct way to play Donkey Kong 64" because I feel like I have, in playing Banjo-Tooie, which I disliked quite a bit when I played it back in the 90s or 2000.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I feel like I was playing it hoping that it would be like Banjo-Kazooie, where, you go in, you complete the world, you move on. And only in the last year or two have I realized that that's fundamentally the wrong way to approach that game. And when you just play Banjo-Tooie as, I'm going to approach the entire game as a world and just sort of freely float through the levels, hey man, laissez-faire, let's just get some jiggies, dude.
Wake and bake, man. You just gotta, roll out of bed, blaze up, and, see what happens.
Right. It's actually a much more enjoyable experience, and that's because the Banjo-Tooie team was trying to fundamentally advance and change the way that people played 3D platformers. The public was not ready for that.
4 years after 3D platformers became a thing.
Yeah.
They were already trying to reinvent the wheel.
Which is why I'm so fucking stoked for Yooka-Laylee, because I want to see how they advance Banjo-Tooie. I can't even contemplate it.
This is completely off topic, but my only fear about Yooka-Laylee is they're going to take any criticisms that were leveled at Tooie, even by us, to heart and make it more regressive.
Yeah, well, yeah. We know a little bit about how the worlds will be constructed. There are these pagey things, and they expand. So I don't know. It makes me nervous, but the thing is, these are the people who created Donkey Kong Country, Donkey Kong Country 2, Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie, Grabbed by the Ghoulies. I trust them. There are no other group of developers that I can place as much trust in as I can in the Playtonic team.
It's essentially the Beatles. The Beatles of video games.
These guys are the Beatles of video games. And guess what? They can be bothered. So, but you look at Donkey Kong 64 compared to that, and
it's the monkeys.
Yeah. They're too busy switching to let anything get them down.
They couldn't get that last straight to Clarksville because they kept falling off the vine.
Right. You said the correct way to play this game, though. The correct way to me to play Banjo-Tooie is to treat it not as a series of worlds, but as one giant world.
Which is interesting because, again, that's one of my hypothetical scenarios for the way Donkey Kong 64 would have been, like back in like 96, when it was just a fantasy in my brain. What was ultimately Banjo-Tooie is what I wanted for Donkey Kong 64. And when I got Banjo-Tooie, I didn't appreciate it a year after Donkey Kong 64. Like, it's like everything got topsy-turvy, and I didn't... My visions, my dreams came true, but I couldn't appreciate it because... reasons. And
I feel like a lot of it was probably fatigue from Donkey Kong 64, and you said, you talked about the point that I was trying to get back to was the correct way to play this game, and you say you think that really what you should do is unlock every character and then play every world all the way through.
No.
5 times.
No. Well, here's the way to do it. When you're Donkey Kong, when you're like, let's say you're Donkey Kong, do everything you can as Donkey Kong and don't worry about anything else.
Mm-hmm.
When you finally hit that wall, then switch out to the next character.
Okay.
And that, for me, that's, I mean, is it ideal? No, but it's the way you've got to just, it's like taking your medicine in small spoonfuls versus...
Right, but that works for the first 2 worlds. But then by the time you get to Frantic Factory, the one we're talking about and the one whose music you're listening to, when you get there, now you have all 5 characters. So what do?
Well, just do the same thing. Don't, like, when you need a character, when you absolutely need a character to unlock something, okay, but, like...
Yeah, but then you say okay
baby
like
steps.
it's some...
Baby steps.
You say okay like it's some easy thing.
Excuse me.
Okay! Oh, but okay oftentimes requires you backtracking to find a tag barrel and then going all the way back to the... Like, that to me, the tag barrel should have been obliterated. You should just have the freedom at any point to change between Kongs.
And they could have done that, right? That's not like a limitation of the...
No, that would have been a very simple fix. You know, that's not a hardware thing.
And I think that was just them trying to apply the DKC style mechanics to this game. Well, we had DK barrels, and you tagged your buddy out when you had a buddy, so let's just combine them and make a tag barrel.
Well, what I don't understand is, like, the coloring of the bananas and the banana coins to restrict them to certain characters. Why not just... You know, each Kong has different moves that allow you to access different areas, you know? Chunky Kong can break through walls. Tiny Kong can shrink. So just make all the bananas yellow, and there are some that are off limits depending on what character you're playing as, and you can only get them as that character. And that's great. That requires you to switch. But... that also means that when you're walking down a fucking hallway in Frantic Factory with the tag barrel 8 minutes behind you, you don't have to feel like you need to backtrack just to collect these red bananas while you're playing as Lanky Kong.
Yeah.
You know? Like, if they had just made all the bananas and banana coins the same color and just put some of them off limits, then it would have been the same thing as like in Banjo-Kazooie, where you just need a new move.
Or they could have just had 100 bananas per world, and it doesn't matter who collects what.
That's also true. Well, anything else to say about Frantic Factory?
You didn't even say anything about Frantic Factory.
Mad Jack. I like Mad Jack quite a bit. I think Mad Jack was a great boss.
He was all right. My issue with Frantic Factory is the same issue I had with Grunny Industries, and not so much the design of Grunny Industries. It's as a factory, it's boring aesthetically. It's boring.
Yeah.
Look at the factories of the Country trilogy. Donkey Country had this like awesome factory, Croc Industries. It was like it had this industrial grunge to it. It was like dirty and like, but like technologically like advanced. And then you got to Country 3.
Well, that's reading a lot into those 2D levels.
Yeah, but it was aesthetically pleasing and exciting.
Sure. Okay.
Visually stimulating.
Okay.
Going back to Country 3, it kind of had this retro, almost like Victorian era, or at least Industrial Revolution era factory, where it was kind of a little steampunk, and it had those big like molten vats like you would dip the Terminator in, and you would give the thumbs up. And I mean, visually interesting. This is just metal walls, and there's moving things occasionally, and it was a toy factory. It was weird.
So what you're saying is Frantic Factory, I know now why you cry. But it's something I can never do.
And who is this factory? Why is he so frantic? And now, like, it was a toy factory too, which felt. I mean, I don't want to be one of those people who are like, oh, that's childish, but it seemed a little childish. Like, why is it a toy factory? I mean, I guess it was cool that they were like having like clockwork Kremlins, but play with that. It was a good idea. You just didn't expand upon it. It was just kind of there.
It was kind of strange.
Like a lot of this game, a lot of just good ideas that are just sitting there and not expanded upon. And meanwhile, you've got 15 other ideas crammed in there. Yeah. So, on the plus side, the next world is Gloomy Galleon, and
well, I used to feel like this was on the plus side, but honestly, I played it again today, and oh boy, thematically close,
spot on. Now this,
good. It's spot on to Donkey Kong Country 2.
Yeah, when I say like the worlds that feel like Donkey Kong worlds and the worlds don't feel like Donkey Kong worlds, Jungle Japes plus category, Angry Aztec, Frantic Factory. Gloomy Galleon, oh yeah, baby, give me more of this.
Yeah, except for, again, the fact that you have to run down a hallway to get to anything interesting.
Forget it, that's what the game is. Get over it.
So I could be confronted with like a shit game and you could just say, get over it, that's what it is.
No, but at this point, yeah, we get it. Hallways. They're going to be in every world.
All right, so once you get past the hallways, then there's this big open area, and I literally just played this, and now we're an hour and a half into this. I played it 2 hours ago. I was swimming around as Tiny Kong, and the mechanics of swimming, the visual darkening that this game does when you go underwater, and the mechanics of jumping out of the water when you reach the surface really made this an entirely frustrating experience, and in such a way that I never felt when I was playing Atlantis in Banjo-Tooie.
I like this world, and this is a world that...
When was the last time you played this world?
Just a couple weeks ago.
Really?
On the Virtual Console, yeah.
Okay.
I like this world.
All right.
And I don't know. This for me, this world is the peak of Donkey Kong 64. This is the best it ever got.
This is the closest it got to scratching the nostalgic itch of the Donkey Kong Country series, but I think it's a fundamental failure as a 3D platforming world.
I had fun with it.
I feel like all the good things that we can say about this world are in its aesthetics.
And hey, maybe that's clouding it too. Maybe because it's such a distilled 3D Donkey Kong experience that I'm overlooking any flaws in gameplay design. But okay, and maybe that's true. I still had fun with it, and ultimately that's all that matters with a video game. Like I if I have fun with it, I'm not going to be harsh towards it. I had fun with Star Fox Adventures, so I'm not going to nitpick that to death.
Right, but also I feel like the gameplay of Star Fox Adventures was much more finely tuned than the gameplay of Donkey Kong 64.
Absolutely.
And to me, if you have these floaty jumps, these swimming mechanics where a paddle does nothing and where a swimming move like propels you forward at breakneck speed, like when you have all of these crazy inconsistencies that add up to a whole lot of frustration, then I don't care how good your game looks and how many nostalgic itches it scratches, I'm gonna be frustrated. And I guess maybe as a 15-year-old I was able to overlook all of that, but
the thing is, by the time I get to the fourth world, I've adapted to all of that.
To me, I don't let a game sucker me into I don't let a game give me Stockholm syndrome anymore. And that's what you're describing.
Not Stockholm syndrome, because
it is. Come on, you say you're getting used to the bad gameplay. That's Stockholm syndrome.
I mean, look, I don't know what you're referring to. I think that's scandalous and insulting allegation to make. What? I think
you thought Charlie Manson had a lot of great ideas, right?
No, I just think that you just don't have the commitment that I do. You can't love something despite its flaws. Like, and if you'll excuse me, I need to take a short break because I need to play some Donkey Konga 2 today. Do
you have anything to say about Puff Toss apart from the fact that it was really nice to see? Okay, It was nice to see a puffed up enemy, and it was also nice to see Shuris. There were a lot of really great DKC2 elements.
Oh
in
god,
this world.
just the Easter eggs when you get into the
Yeah.
hull of the sunken ship. By the way, we got to have this, at least touch upon this debate. I have a feeling we're going to be on opposite sides of the issue, and we're not going to agree. Is this the Gangplank Galleon or not?
I don't care.
You don't care.
No, I don't care. To me, the world's Donkey Kong 64. It is such a dry fart of creativity. I don't care what the hell they were going for.
Well,
I just don't.
For the record, to get it out there in the public, I don't believe this is the Gangplank Galleon.
Okay.
Solely for the reason that
It's not. Well, it's not crashed.
Well, it depresses because the Gangplank Galleon. What I love about it is it's still seaworthy. Like it's got a big hole in it, but they just patch it up, keep going. So I like the idea that the Gangplank. I like the idea that the Gangplank Galleon is still out there, helmed by Clubba. So
well, I guess that begs the question: in the ending cinema of DKC2, what was K. Rool riding in when he sailed away from Crocodile Isle?
Oh, the Gangplank Galleon.
Yeah.
For me,
so it wouldn't have been Clubba's vessel. Then it's
Clubba eventually took it over because K. Rool came back in Donkey Kong Land 2.
Right.
And he didn't sail away at the end of that game.
Oh, so that's where
Clubba got it.
Okay, I got you.
So anyway, this is it's firmly established in DKC2 that K. Rool sunk a lot of ships.
Yes.
And that this is just another one of them.
But one of them that had human slaves in the hold.
Apparently, yes. Scrap 69 on the forum brought that to our attention, and I'm sure we noticed it back in the day, and this was before we really, really became obsessive about analyzing stuff like that. But
he took the time to take Wii U screenshots of it,
and he also took the time to make a slave connection with blood diamonds and referring to them as dark lads.
Oh God, really?
Uh-huh.
Is that a thing? Is that like a term that the South African or West African slave traders use?
No, that's a term that Scrap 69 uses.
Dark lads?
He was on the show last year, remember?
Let's just pretend the phrase dark lads doesn't exist. Jesus Christ.
Fair enough. Thank you, Scraps.
Hey lads.
Hey lads. Dark lads.
Fucking hell.
So, Gloomy Galleon. Yeah, I like it. I think we're gonna just have to agree to disagree here. For me, if the whole game is Gloomy Galleon, I wouldn't have any issues.
Okay, I'm sorry. That was just a humorous statement.
Stand
by it.
I stand by it.
Fungi Forest.
Fungi Forest. Now this world, fuck this world. Fuck this world. This world.
So here's the thing. Fungi Forest is where, like, I remember feeling a little bit more comfortable with the game because this was unapologetically an attempt at a Banjo game.
This is a Banjo-Kazooie world that sucks.
That's the thing.
This is Click Clock Wood. If Click Clock Wood had huffed paint fumes and I don't know, like it had birth defects.
Right.
Like, it's
bad. It's bad. It's yeah. So it has.
And look, this is weird because I just posted in my travel log series on Facebook called Destination Donkey Kong Universe every Thursday night. I posted the other week Fungi Forest, and a lot of people chimed in. Oh, I love this world. Oh, this is my favorite world from DK64. So we're stepping in it a bit by slagging off on it.
Oh, fuck it, man. Look. This episode is for our actual opinions as humans. We can still love the music, the artistry, the world building, but if it doesn't fundamentally function as a good game world, we can still criticize it for such, you know?
Here's my question about Fungi Forest. Because we know Banjo-Kazooie infamously had a cut world called Fungus Forest.
Right.
Now, how much of this, and I can't imagine actually a whole lot, how much of this was from Banjo-Kazooie, or did they just take the idea?
Honestly, my guess is that Fungus Forest turned into Click Clock Wood, and there was just a piece of music left over, and then that became this. Although, hey, now hang on a second. Now that I think about it, the piece of music in Banjo-Kazooie's debug menu called Advent is pretty clearly for the outside of Freezeezy Peak, because that's an Advent calendar. And yet it sounds pretty identical to the Fungi Forest music. So it's difficult to tell how much rip-off, crossover, reappropriation there was.
Like what was the DK64 team like behind? They're in a pinch, so they walk down the hall. Hey, do you got any scraps for us? Like, you got lads? Do you got any any unused elements we could implement in our game? Like, that's not the way it works, because they're completely different games. But
yeah, well, if they were operating off of the same engine, maybe they're like, yeah, hey, take this one, see what you can do with it.
Yeah, I don't know. This has always been an enigma to me, because a lot of people say, oh, this was a world that was going to be in Banjo-Kazooie, but they put it in Donkey Kong 64 instead. That's not right. That's not the way it works.
That doesn't make sense. And if
this world was in Banjo-Kazooie, I can see why they cut it.
Exactly, because it's the same thing as Click Clock Wood, only shittier.
Only it sucks. Only the concept sucks. It's day to night, except the only thing that changes is gates are locked and there's skeletons for some reason.
Yeah, there's skeletons and there are tomatoes that want to eat you, and there's Rodney the Hare.
Rodney the Hare, really the best thing to come out of this world. At least
not Hooter, not Hooter the Owl, that we also named. Which, by the way, this tells you a little bit about how much the Banjo team cared about naming characters, or cared about the characters they were creating, versus the DKC3 team that ultimately went on to do DK64.
DKC3 team gave us the Brothers Bear, so watch what you say.
That's fair enough. I don't want to besmirch Benny and Bjorn, but they didn't even see fit to give, these NPCs names, whereas there was never a question in Banjo-Tooie what Bovina's name was.
Yeah, and if you did have a question about it, they would resolve that with the character parade at the end.
Exactly. Yeah, the character parade. Like there was, it just felt like everything that was populating this world, that was in this world, was just a means to an end, and that end was to, for the love of God, put out a Donkey Kong game on the Nintendo 64.
Hurry. It has to be out by November 1999.
It's gotta get out, because we only have like 1.5 years left in this console cycle. For fuck's sake, put out a Donkey Kong game. I don't care what you call the rabbit that Lanky Kong races, just put the game out.
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be obsessive weirdos who are going to come along and name it for us. It's fine.
Yeah, we don't. In 15 years, if there are two jackasses that pick this apart on a currently non-existent form of media called a podcast, who gives a shit?
Yeah. Now pass me the Coke.
Yeah. That was the one defining thing about 1999: the cocaine.
Developing in an English barn. Yes.
Yeah.
Cocaine aplenty.
Yeah. That. That's why there were 201 golden bananas, because greed is good.
Oh. I like the minecart in Fungi Forest.
Yeah, it's the same thing as we said about Jungle Japes, and we can say the same thing about Creepy Castle.
The tree, the giant mushroom you were in kind of sucked.
Yeah, it did. It also sucked? Those little mushrooms that you climbed up, how as soon as you grabbed onto them, you were immediately clipping into them. It also sucked how whenever you were running throughout the open areas of Fungi Forest, you couldn't see where the fuck anything was, because the draw distance in this game was so abysmal that the mushrooms would appear and disappear at random. Like, it was just... It was unplayably bad, but again, they're working with an IP that prevents them from taking a step back and saying, should we actually release this? They had no choice but to put out this game.
Tonally, this world was also one of those that was off, along with Angry Aztec, along with Frantic Factory. It just it was like it was like,
were you about to say sucked? It just sucked.
I realized we've used that word like 30 times in the last 5 minutes. This was like a garden gnome realm. It was far too whimsical for this series. It would have suited Banjo, although Banjo would have done it better. This was just kind of a watered-down Banjo by way of Donkey Kong, and it just served nobody. It wasn't pleasing whatsoever.
Yeah. It tried to do. It tried to copy too many things and ultimately satisfied nobody.
Again, it didn't have an identity of its own. So
right.
I hate Fungi Forest. I'm sorry.
Don't apologize to me, man.
I'm apologizing to the people out there who love Donkey Kong 64 and are probably fed up with us. At this point.
But here's to those people again, and we have 3 more worlds to get through. To those people, I would say there are so many fantastic elements of this game. It's unfortunate that upon putting them all together and saddling them with the gameplay input, like this is your mechanism for interacting with these great things. The fact that mechanism sucks, that's the unfortunate part. But that's not to besmirch the artistry that goes into those disparate elements.
Right. Okay. And I just got done praising Gloomy Galleon, so I know it was just a total shift to say, I hate this one.
I hate it. Fuck it.
1,000 Fiery Suns. No, it's just the way it is. It's the nature of this game. It's tonal whiplash. Moving on.
Crystal Caves, though. So what do you reckon on that one?
Meh, middle of the road.
Really?
Okay. Here's my problem with Crystal Caves. As far as capturing the aesthetic, it's a little bit better. However, the ice cavern from the original game, this is clearly trying to ape. That was beautiful. It was shimmering, sparkling. It was a wonder to behold. You wanted to see more of this ice cavern.
Well, after you got through the hallway.
No, Crystal Caves, however. I'm talking about the ice cavern from Donkey Kong Country.
Right.
Crystal Caves, it's a cave that's cold.
Well, yeah, but it did have... to me, I'm a little mixed, because Crystal Caves did have a few standout moments where...
The frozen tomato, right?
Well, okay. First off, it had the same problem that Hailfire Peaks in Banjo-Tooie had, where you needed to defeat a thing to stop hellfire from raining on you, and only then could you really appreciate the world.
Which is really an annoying mechanic, and without divulging anything about what's going on with Lobo Destroyo, this is a discussion we had the other week, actually, in a writing session with Jamie Guy and Tom Bennett, where we said, you know what? I don't think anybody really likes things like that.
Yeah, that's I guess one positive to take from us, raking these games over the coals, is that in doing so, we're actually trying to examine and deconstruct them to help figure out what will work for a contemporary 3D platformer.
Right.
But after you get rid of that arbitrarily giant Kasha, because I guess they couldn't be bothered to create a unique enemy.
Do you think Ringo Starr was involved, anonymously, he didn't get credited or anything, but you think Ringo Starr is to blame?
Yeah, maybe it should have been a wax figure of Ringo up there.
Wait a second, it's starting to add up. You do take a lot of photographs in this game.
Maybe that was ultimately what King Cutout was supposed to be. Creepy Castle, or not even Crystal Caves. It's all blurring together. Crystal Caves. It just.
Talking about this game is as tiring as playing it.
I feel like I haven't even gotten close to the green bananas yet. There were areas in this world where I walked into them and it took my breath away, and I felt like, this is that stage, slip slide ride from Donkey Kong Country, but then you keep moving on and there's just a whole bunch of there were a lot of these weird basalt, hexagonal spires coming out of the Glitter Gulch mine used very heavily and to great effect. But
Glitter Gulch mine knew what it wanted to be.
Exactly. It was a fucking mine. Like, why are these things in Crystal Cave? Like, what?
And what's the deal with that ice castle thing?
Is it a tomato or is it a man? Like, you're talking about the one that had the tomato in it that says, "Oh, hey, Lanky."
Yeah, why was there an ice castle?
That's a good question. Why the fuck was there an ice castle? Why was there an igloo? It makes sense in Hailfire Peaks for there to be an igloo where Boggy lives because they established in Freezing Peak there's an igloo where Boggy lives.
And he masturbates to porn in it.
He loves porn. He loves Mr. Pants.
Don't we all?
Jesus Christ.
So say we all.
So say we all. Crystal Caves was just...
Wait, you like this? Going into this, you're like, oh, I like Crystal. Like, I was like, oh, this is one of the worlds Chad McCanna likes.
And I remember liking it, but then, as I said, in preparation for this episode, I went back and I played all those worlds, and this is barren. There are sections.
Baron K. Rolenstein?
There are sections that are lovely. There are some incredible little moments, but
and really, we're just repeating the same thing. It's the story of Donkey Kong 64. There are moments that are lovely.
Yeah, but they are fleeting, and then you realize I have to keep playing this game. I have to walk away from this lovely thing and collect more purple bananas.
And really, I love collectathons. I don't think collectathon should be an ugly word like it's become.
No, it's not a pejorative, but it can be abused, and this game abuses it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, honestly, that might have been one of the strokes of genius, and we probably criticized it when it came out, in Banjo-Tooie, where they decided that the musical notes would actually be nests of 5 musical notes. That might have been one of the best things that they did in that game.
Honestly, that might have been a reaction to what was going on with Donkey Kong 64.
It might have been, yeah, if there were just 100 notes scattered around the worlds of Tooie, it probably wouldn't have been that bad, but... compared to 500 bananas in every world, holy shit!
And there's never banana bunches either. Oh no, there's the balloons. I guess there were the balloons,
and there are banana bunches.
Were there?
Yeah, you get 5 bananas from the banana bunches. You get 10 bananas
right.
from the balloons.
I completely spaced on that.
Because nothing's more fun than spending 8 seconds climbing a tree as Lanky Kong, only to realize that there's a red bunch of bananas at the top of that tree that only Diddy can get. Because that's great.
Well, it's still more fun than getting castrated.
Yes, that is true. Theon Greyjoy would prefer playing Donkey Kong 64.
Crystal Caves. It's middle of the road. The one thing I like about it, I guess, it's how linear it is.
Mm-hmm.
At least it's one big hallway.
Yeah, that's not a saving grace. That's not even because it's a big hallway that has a vertical tier. So if you fall off of one element of that hallway, you fall into the water at the bottom. And the jumping, mind you, that's one of those gameplay criticisms. You don't jump high enough, and the jumping is completely imprecise, and the camera doesn't really give you an accurate enough image of where you're landing. And I struggle to figure out why Banjo, Kazooie, and Tooie are so much better than this game, but honestly, I feel like if Donkey Kong 64 had just totally ripped off the Banjo engine, it would have been a lot more successful.
We would have hated that, though. Ultimately, in retrospect, our opinions may have been different back in '99 as they were with this, but coming down on the side of history, we would have just absolutely hated it. I'm glad we got what we got, honestly.
No, I disagree. I feel like the Banjo engine was far more playable, and if this game used a far more playable engine, I would not have begrudged it.
That wouldn't be fair to Banjo.
What do you
for
mean
this game to rip it off.
It already rips it off. What are you talking about?
But I mean, successfully ripping it off. It would, like, at least this game fails trying to do a myriad of things rather than just completely doing the same thing.
Okay, so you would rather have this game be a collection of failures as opposed to a successful reappropriation?
It's healthy for the soul.
No, it's not. My soul doesn't feel enriched by the last two hours of bitching. Does yours?
I think yes. I think I'm a better person for it.
Whatever.
All right.
Creepy Castle.
Creepy Castle.
How about that one? Let's talk about fucking Creepy Castle.
This is how like much I in our notes I wrote this as Haunted Hall.
Yeah, you thought this level was called Haunted Hall,
which is a classic stage from Donkey Kong Country 2. Oh, if only it was Haunted Hall. Okay, Creepy Castle. It's a little bit more successful for being so tonally wrong for Donkey Kong.
There were same. I have the exact same notes as I have about Crystal Caves. There were some sections of Creepy Castle that were positively lovely, and not in the sense that they're like aesthetically beautiful or serene, but that made me smile.
And there's some generally creepy bits in there too.
And that's what I mean by lovely. Like they are thematically appropriate. They're not off-putting, and they're not obstructed by the substandard gameplay.
When you're in the tombs, the catacombs, and you hear the moaning, that's effective.
Perfect example. The ballroom.
The ballroom, yes.
Yeah.
Where you hear the ghost of upper crest partygoers from yore.
Yeah, and there are also portraits of Captain K. Rool all over the place, which was a nice touch.
Yeah, although I'm not sure what the fuck this castle is supposed to be.
Yeah, well, King Cutout doesn't really help us answer that question either, does it?
Seriously, they could. Yeah, what was that about?
King Cutout. They have like, if you ever had any idea that they were completely creatively bankrupt by the end of this game, look no further than King Cutout.
I remember, I think it was the Player's Guide or something tried to justify King Cutout as it's K. Rool playing my games with you because he, World 8 is next, and he's I don't know. But of course, King Cutout is a living, breathing cardboard cutout too. He's a real character because he makes noises.
Although he's also being held up by critters.
Yeah, because he's a cardboard cutout. He can't stand up by himself. But
could it not be those critters that are making the noises?
No, that's silly. This is a floating haunted castle that is above Donkey Kong Island or in another realm, but it's still floating in midair. And
and we were talking about DK Isles. Yeah, what the fuck? You access this and Fungi Forest by a barrel that shoots you up into the fucking sky. Come on. You clearly designed Donkey Kong Island to only address a certain number of stages, and then realize through development, oh shit, we gotta put some more stuff on here. I guess you just shoot off into the air.
Well, why did there have to be a creepy castle to begin with? Like, this is what I don't get, because Super Mario 64 had the Boo House, because Banjo-Kazooie has Mad Monster Mansion. Like, you don't need a haunted castle or mansion in this game. It doesn't fit. Like, how to do it for DK? Look at Gloomy Gulch. It was subtle. There were haunted bits, but it
was a forest. It was natural. It fit, and then they even took it into a library. But they gave us this series of ghost Kremlings, the cackles that made it fit.
That also fit with the pirate theme.
It fit with the pirate theme, and the gameplay did not suffer as a result.
So lovely bits in the world itself.
I'll tell you the best thing about Creepy Castle, and I wager you would agree, the music.
Oh yeah, Grant Kirkhope kills it here.
Yeah, this is one of those stages, and Gloomy Galleon is another one. yeah, the soundtrack is fucking phenomenal. And actually, on the Vine Donkey Kong audio program, Jeremy Thorne did an excellent cover of this song. Creepy Castle has excellent music that I think the rest of the stage lets down. It doesn't do it justice.
Yeah, and like I said, excellent bits, and that's that's all there is.
It's just like you. It's the same problem. Like you walk in, you get into Creepy Castle, and you're like, oh wow, this castle thing, and
It sure is creepy.
even the lobby area, it evokes Donkey Kong Country 2 because you've got this green toxic stuff that's like Toxic Tower from the end of Donkey Kong Country 2, and it's a castle, so you're like, oh, this is gonna be great. This is gonna be just like the end of that game, and you get into the stage, and it's a whole bunch of it's this dark rock face. And then you got to walk across a bridge, like not a bridge. You have to walk across a plank of wood, and then kinda you start to scale around the outside of this thing. It doesn't expose anything to you. There's no sense of grandeur. There's no context for what you're about to do. You're just sort of dropped off at the bottom and told to, well, you've gone this far. You better just fucking keep going.
Yeah. All right.
I'm honestly I'm surprised to hear you being so down on this game. I thought I was going to be alone on this.
No, look, I have my issues with the game. I'm not as extreme with my negativity about this game. Maybe I made my peace with it. Maybe.
No, I think that look, I think that I may be being more vocal, but I feel like we're on the same page. All I'm saying is that I had anticipated you being the apologist for this title, but I'm glad that we're both sort of looking at it with objective eyes.
I have apologized for quite a bit over the last 2 hours.
Well, no. But I think we're consistent with what we're apologizing for. We're saying that there are disparate elements of the title that are artistically sound and often fantastic, but when you access them through this pretty substandard gameplay and structure, it's hard to appreciate them as part of the whole.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what the fuck is Hideout Helm?
I like Hideout Helm.
What I recall of Hideout Helm is that there's some lava, and then you get up to then you're up where the intro cinema takes place, right? You're running up through the Blastomatic, basically.
Hideout Helm
right?
is what the whole game is leading up to. This is why you're collecting blueprints.
Yeah.
Because if you, however many blueprints you collect from the Casplats, and take to Snide, that's how much time you're afforded, because apparently Snide is able to devise a signal jammer or something because the Blastomatic is going live. That's active, but Snide's able to delay it.
It's active as soon as you enter Hideout Helm.
Yeah. But Snide is able to delay it depending on how many blueprints you get, and that affords you the time to get through Hideout Helm.
So it's not really a proper world.
But it's so much more successful than any of the worlds prior to this.
Probably due to its linearity.
It's linear. It has a mission statement. It has a focus.
Yeah.
And you actually, using all 5 Kongs, feels right.
In an effective way, too. Like, there are puzzles where you go in, you realize, I can't solve this. You have to actually do some creative thinking, realize maybe Tiny is the best person for this task. You go through, which is the same thing that Banjo did so effectively, just with its moves.
This is where the team had extreme clarity of vision. I don't have anything negative to say about Hideout Helm, because I think this is what the whole game should have been. Now, a lot more is afforded to Hideout Helm because it is the climax. It is everything that we've been building up to, so maybe the whole game couldn't be like this, but oh man, it's sweet.
Yeah, I feel like
the only downside is you have to play through the whole game to get to it.
Right, and then once you do get through Hideout Helm,
use Rambi. There's a section with Rambi.
You can't really go back and play it again, which also sucks. It is one of those great segments, but it's not like, in Donkey Kong Country you can go to any world and it sort of resets. You don't get that with Hideout Helm.
Well, and what I love about it, though, is that you have the timer. And I know I've railed against timers in, like, Mario games, but it's different here because it ties into the story. And for the first time, you feel the pressure, like, oh, my God, the island's going to blow up if I don't do this by the end of the timer. Like, it's intense.
It's a hypocrisy.
Oh, come on. It ties into the story. You need a segment where the time is ticking down.
No,
if you're going to have a death laser pointed at your island.
I get that. It's the trope that Team America skewered so effectively. And it works.
But tropes work in video games.
That's the thing. Yes, it works, and that's the thing.
This isn't a movie.
I'm not gonna say it's more effective than Mario. I just feel like it's appropriate here.
Yeah. So anyway, after you finish Hideout Helm, then yada yada yada, K. Rool escapes in the K Cruiser 2.
Love that.
Yeah, well, that's actually something Payon contributed, because this was unnamed like so much in Donkey Kong 64. Payon introduced the K Cruiser 3, retroactively making this the K Cruiser 2 and making the Flying Croc a nickname for the K Cruiser 1.
Right.
Anyway, so thank you, Payon, for stepping in where the DK64 team couldn't be bothered.
It's nice when we're not the ones having to retroactively create canon names for things.
This is why we love Payon. I mean, Payon's always going to be like all-stars in our book. But you unlock K. Lumsy, which we haven't mentioned K. Lumsy at all in these Spotlight episodes. K. Lumsy is
what's to mention?
He's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man sized Kremlin that's been locked up in a cage offshore. And because
for reasons,
because he wouldn't wreck up Donkey Kong Island, because he's a Kremlin with a heart of gold. And I do like that not all Kremlins are evil,
But we already knew that.
Yeah, we already knew that, but it's nice that it continues.
Okay.
Anyway, so you unlock him, and he skips around, and he starts chasing the K Cruiser 2, and he knocks it out of the sky, and it crashes. And then you regain control, and you go to the back of the island, and there's a K Cruiser 2, and there's a hole in it. You jump in it, and then you're in a boxing match.
All right, so here's the thing. While the transition you just described makes no fucking sense, I really like this boss battle.
Oh yeah, so do I. It's silly. Like I defended it last week. It's silly. It's a cartoon, but it's kind of just gonzo, and it builds on what K. Rool is. Like K. Rool's failed at this point, so instead of being the cool, calm, collected Bond villain he was the entire game, he snaps. And he's like, right. I'm a boxer now.
Right, exactly. He's basically gone for broke, and it's to me this is K. Rool. This is K. Rool. K. Rool to me is a crocodile Baron von Ghoul. He's not
as bad as Baron von Ghoul.
He's not the crocodile Dr. Claw. He's Crocodile Baron von Ghoul.
But that was kind of a persona in this game. I mean,
and I didn't like that.
But he was putting it on. He was putting it on. It was as an act, or maybe he was feeling so good about himself.
I don't feel like
so big.
I don't feel like the Donkey Kong 64 team thought it was an act. I feel like they forgot what tone they were establishing halfway through the game.
I feel like K. Rool, he doesn't have these mental breaks 24/7 like Baron von Ghoul. I feel like these breaks occur after failure.
I feel like this podcast is successful in that we are trying to compare K. Rool to Baron von Ghoul in any way. We have actually mentioned the name Baron von Ghoul.
That 80% of the people listening to this don't even know who Baron von Ghoul is, considering how many people actually played Grab by the Ghoulies.
Grab by the Ghoulies is fantastic, and if you haven't played it, you owe it to yourself to seek it out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like this fight. I love that you had to use all the Kongs. Some of the mechanics were a little wonky, but
it was a bit hard controlling Diddy in his segment.
Yeah, well, that that whole I guess his crystal coconut jet barrel thing was hard in general.
Well,
so.
and that is, you've been railing against the controls. I haven't really mentioned it. I said by the time I got to Gloomy Galleon, I was used to them. But, however, there are still issues throughout the game. This included where the game expects precision, and it doesn't afford you that opportunity.
Yeah, it doesn't give you... when we've talked about games in the past, the one thing I keep coming back to when I say I don't like a game is that if I don't feel like I'm in control, I generally dislike it.
Yeah.
When I'm not in control and it's not my fault, I dislike a game.
Now, this game isn't as bad as something like Superman 64. Like, you're in control.
Sure. Although, hey, the fog in Superman 64, that's about the same draw distance as those fucking mushrooms in Fungi Forest, all right? just because the rest of the level renders, there are still elements in this game. They didn't obscure it with fog. They just didn't fucking make it happen visually. Like there are some giant glaring visual errors. But yeah, Superman 64 was still a much bigger failure.
A much bigger failure, let's be clear.
Superman 64, worse than Donkey Kong 64.
Nope, nobody's ever beaten Superman 64. Okay,
not even the QA team.
Okay, this game is an 80-hour affair, and plenty of people beat it. So let's be clear.
All right.
And a lot of people cite this as one of their favorites of all time. We disagree, but
no, we can't disagree with someone saying it's their favorite. I think that
it's definitely not our favorite.
Well, the people that say it's their favorite, I think it's probably because they're focused on those distinct parts: the characterization by way of animation, the music, the distinct aesthetics of some areas, but when you put it all together, it doesn't make a fun game. So I can understand people approaching this as we did at an impressionable, at an age where you aren't thinking as critically as you would as an adult, and you can sort of be blinded by the trees and not look at the forest. Mm-hmm. And that's what we both did. So
there are no trees. There is no forest.
Right. Well, if there is, you certainly can't see it until you're like 5 feet in front of it.
Right. You're blinded by the hover vines.
But you know what I mean? Like I feel like the people who really loved this game are not illegitimately loving it. There are definitely things to love in this game, but when you view it as a whole,
it is what it is, and we're never going to all agree on everything. But
you like K. Rool's fight, though?
Yeah, it was a great way to end the game. And the game ends strong. Hideout Helm and the K. Rool battle. At least the game ends on its feet. It doesn't just trip across the finish line, even if it took 80 hours to get there.
Right.
What about the ending? Like, what do you think about the ending as it was?
It was fine. I mean, at that point, really, do you even care about... Like,
like with Candy coming out and seducing K. Rool.
Oh, that. I was thinking more of the parts where, like, the seals, the knot clappers, bounce K. Rool across the ocean, and
that was fine.
Whatever.
But what I really like though is the scene in the banana horde, where Donkey Kong is all of the golden bananas are back, and Cranky's coming, but he takes forever, so Donkey falls asleep, and then you get that awesome moment where Cranky approaches Donkey and pats a sleeping Donkey on his head.
Yep.
And that was like the sweetest, like most genuine moment between the two in the entire Rare era.
Yes, and that's what I think we didn't get enough of. That this game had the potential to provide was genuine interaction between Kong characters. All we really had was, Candy Kong was an innuendo machine. Funky Kong was a gun nut. Cranky Kong was just being a dick. But beyond that, you want to have...
Wrinkly was dead.
Wrinkly was dead, yeah. Woo! You want to have some underpinning of...
Why wasn't, like, Creepy Castle the cemetery that Wrinkly was buried in?
That's a very good question. Yeah, there should have at least been a headstone with something clever on it. If not the team, then Wrinkly or something.
I mean, Wrinkly's a spirit. Like, how is she not factoring into this world at all? Whatever.
Because it's a Kremlin castle. Why would Wrinkly be buried? Who gives a shit? You want to... This was... That was the one time when they actually gave us a character beat to really care about. And I so loved that. We would see a little bit more of it in the somewhat anachronistic or apocryphal Dolphin auditions.
If you got 101%, you saw the Dolphin.
Yeah.
Wait, Cranky auditioning for the next Donkey Kong game,
right?
Or Cranky auditioning, being the casting director for
next.
Cranky's casting couch. That's coming soon at dkvine.com/redtube. But what I like, if you really want to get meta about it, Cranky being in charge of casting the next Donkey Kong game hates everybody, so no returning characters get into Donkey Kong Jungle Beat.
They're not fresh enough.
Yeah.
You'll note that the banana did not audition.
Yeah, so, I mean, the game ends strong. And ultimately, though, what is the legacy of Donkey Kong 64?
I think it's I think Donkey Kong 64 should be remembered as a collection of art that was strung together by a lesser whole. It was
a museum.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to appreciate Donkey Kong 64. There are some very they pushed the N64 hardware in some interesting directions. There's some great animation. There's some really fucking lazy animation. There's some phenomenal music in this game, but it doesn't really function as a good game, or even a good Donkey Kong game, or even a good game. It's just kind of it's a slog, but if you can put up with that slog, you will get to appreciate some good things. To me, I don't know if it's even worth it, though.
Here's what I think is really interesting, though. We have this opinion, and we were around for the SNES era, so we were big Donkey Kong Country fans.
We're fucking old.
We're old, and we were old. We didn't realize that we were old by 1999. Relatively speaking.
Well, to today's gamers, certainly.
Yeah, but I mean, some people, it was 5 years between Donkey Kong Country and Donkey Kong 64. This was a lot of people's first Donkey Kong game, and it's still to this day a lot of people's favorite. Hell, the president of Camelot Software Planning over in Japan loves this game. He wants to do a sequel to it. It was a big news story a year or two ago. We don't know if anything's actually going to come from it, but it's interesting that even people we generally respect and people in the industry say Donkey Kong 64. Yeah, that's a game I really paid attention to, which this is what Paul McCartney claims Steven Spielberg told him about Magical Mystery Tour. Where Magical Mystery Tour, another. That's a Donkey Kong 64. If you want to bring the Beatles back into it, where it's got interesting bits here or there, but it's a fucking mess when you put it all together.
I feel like the fool on the hill.
Yeah, but hey, people like it. There's something about it, and people keep coming back to it. When you look at the most influential games in the series, the entire series, discounting the arcade games, because of course that's going to be the most influential, but you got Donkey Kong 64, the original. You've got Donkey Kong Country Returns, the revival. And you've got Donkey Kong 64. For as much as we go on about Donkey Kong Country 2 or 3 or Tropical Freeze, those are the three games that really matter to people, that really stay in the public consciousness. And like it or not, this game has reached a lot more people than DKC 2.
Yeah.
Like it or not.
Well, here's what I would say to anyone who has if Donkey Kong 64 is your first game, turn it off and play Banjo-Kazooie, then play Banjo-Tooie. If you love Donkey Kong 64 for the 3D platforming, play those games. If you love it for the Donkey Kong license, turn it off and play Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze or Donkey Kong Country or Donkey Kong Country 2 or 3 or hey, even Returns. It's the least effective 3D platformer in the Donkey Kong universe. It's the least effective Donkey Kong game in the main Donkey Kong series line that was made by Rare.
Okay,
let me finish. That was made by Rare. It's the least effective Rare game in the Donkey Kong universe. Fuck it. It's the least effective Rare game. It is the most disappointing Rare game. It's Mr. Pants is way more fun to me than this game.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
This is the bottom of the barrel that for some reason doesn't exist in this game outside the fucking training mode.
Why were you trained to use barrels?
Why are you trained? Yeah, because you have to throw them at Armadillo, but apparently they forgot about that. Jesus Christ. What is wrong with this game? It is so cobbled together. It's coming back to what we said last week. There's no mission statement for this game. There's no reason for it to exist. It exists because there had to be a Donkey Kong game on the Nintendo 64. But they weren't saying anything by virtue of this game existing.
Okay, so good way to wrap it up then is, what would we have to say? Because look, President of Camelot says he wants to do a new 3D Donkey Kong game in the vein of Donkey Kong 64. Ken Tanabe said, wouldn't it be nice if Donkey Kong could have 2D and 3D games like Mario? Mm-hmm. So it's in the air at Nintendo, bouncing around. I
love Ken Tanabe.
It's going to happen one day. Sooner or later, we're going to get a new 3D Donkey Kong game.
Sure.
How do you avoid the mistakes of this game, and what direction do you take?
Well, I think we kind of outlined all the mistakes of this game. Do we need to go back over them? I would if you have multiple playable characters, allow the user to either switch them on the fly or not require them to achieve everything in the game. Perhaps a la DKCTF, Tropical Freeze, there could be sections where you require a certain character to, get high enough to get up there, or, something like that.
As far as what I would do, I think I already alluded to it. Not alluded, I straight up said, either do it Super Mario 3D World style, minus the obnoxious obstacle course design, and actually have it be lush, smaller 3D levels instead of massive worlds on a map screen. Have it be styled like Donkey Kong Country, but with full freedom of movement once you get into the levels.
It sounds like 3D World. Sounds like Galaxy 2 a little bit.
Or, even a more advanced, sophisticated Crash Bandicoot.
Okay.
Or Banjo-Tooie style. I want to see that massive world where I'm running around the Congo jungle.
See, here's the thing, though. If you do it like a Banjo game, though, they didn't respect what Donkey Kong Country was. The characters need to be able to jump really fucking high.
Okay, but
they need to be able to hop and bop. They need to be able to roll quickly. The pace needs to be quick. That's not the pace in Donkey Kong Country was so fast. That was what set it apart from Mario. The pace in 64 is plodding.
Okay, but that's ultimately what you got to decide. Do you want a 3D Donkey Kong Country, or do you want a 3D Donkey Kong experience that doesn't necessarily chain itself to that style?
I want a game that's made well. And
ultimately, that's all I want too.
This game was not made well.
It was made with good intentions, with talented as hell people. I mean,
Yeah.
let's be fair. This team has made good stuff before and after.
Absolutely, yeah. This is not to say that these people are hacks. You know,
I think they were put in a bad situation, and they didn't have enough time to spin gold out of horseshit.
Right. And the fact that so many people love it to this day speaks volumes about what they were able to put into the title.
The fact that there's so much good in it, I think ultimately speaks to their talent and speaks to a game that could have been.
Yes.
And
I would love to take the world of Donkey Kong 64 and play it as Banjo and Kazooie.
I think really think about it. I think this is where Rare really started to run into the troubles that they hit in the Microsoft era, where they couldn't keep up with the modern speed of game design and the scope. I think this is the first inclination of that.
Really? Because Banjo-Tooie came out 1 year later and
that was made by a different team who had already had one game under their belt.
But you were talking about Rare, and this was made by a team that had one Donkey Kong game under their belt. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not a Rare thing.
It was the first chink in the armor, though, where eventually.
It wasn't Mickey's Speedway USA.
Well, no, this was in the Microsoft era. They would have. A game like Donkey Kong 64 would have spent 5 years in development before Microsoft would have stepped in and say, okay, just can the fucking thing. But ultimately this game had to be released in 1999. It was the big holiday game. I think that... I don't know. I don't know.
We're at a loss for words on this thing.
I really, really, really want to know more about the history, because I feel like we're making a lot of assumptions that may not be true, but ultimately feel right. We're just following our gut. And
we're following our gut in the attempt to give the people that we know to be very talented the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
And I don't feel like that's folly. I feel like that's almost certainly what we should be doing, because there's always the online knee-jerk reaction of, if something is bad, that means everyone who worked on it, who even touched it, is a fucking hack fraud and should die in a fire. And and we like to be a little bit more reasonable and realistic about our opinions and our approach. And it's just strange.
Even when we were reactionary nut jobs, back in the day, we were still more reasoned than that.
Yeah. This is just a strange one, because, as we established last week, we were very hyperbolically positive about this, like ridiculously so. And now we are looking at it with what I feel is more objectivism, but that's ultimately winding up to be fairly negative. So it's tough for us to reconcile those two opinions, but I feel like we've been fair, but firm but fair.
Ultimately, though, I think that if you are a Donkey Kong fan, you do owe it to yourself to play this game. No. I mean, I feel like
have fun with that, man. I'm never touching it again.
It's an experience that you need to have at least once. And hey, I had fun with this the first time around. The thing about it is, what separates a good game from a great game, it's the desire to ever replay it. And once you beat Donkey Kong 64, most people never had that desire to play it again.
I don't necessarily feel like you should judge a game based on how you feel after you play it. I feel like you should the calling card of a good game is that you feel engaged and rewarded and enriched while you were playing it.
I was engaged playing this, though. That's the thing. Like, I'm not going to lie and say I didn't enjoy getting to the very end of the game. It's just once I was done with it, I was done.
Okay, but you were also playing it as a 15-year-old.
That doesn't matter. I still enjoy. Yeah, and now I'm a 31-year-old who is still having trouble replaying it. Getting past a certain segment in the game because that desire is not there. But it's also because my 15-year-old self played it and enjoyed it.
I guess, yeah. I mean, I guess that it's the same way that, you know, as a 15-year-old, I really liked the first 2.5 seasons of South Park, but as an adult, I agree with Trey Parker and Matt Stone's assessment that they kind of sucked, and that the series got much better as it went along because it was more rewarding on an intellectual level. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's successful in the context of being a 14-year-old, but I feel like if you're going to take a step back and make an objective criticism of the title, then it's not enriching in the way that Banjo-Tooie is.
No, and you know, we keep comparing it. You especially keep comparing it to,
I feel like it's fair.
To
Tell
the
me if
to the
that's not
Banjo-Kazooie.
fair. Is that fair?
It's fair, but one reason we are being as harsh as we are is it's because it's rare. It's rare. The House of Wonder. You know, all these fantastic games from Rare that we're, I mean, undoubtedly obsessed with to this day.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if Donkey Kong 64 came from any other studio, we would be more lenient towards it.
Mario 64 is way more fun than this game.
This has been a File 2 production.
Que rico.
I'm at a loss for words. I need to lie down.